Hey, what's up guys? Brian Kelly here from Zombie Guitar. Here in today's video, I want to do one more video about the CAGED system since we've been talking about that for the past couple weeks. Someone sent me an email asking if you could use the CAGED system to play complex chord progressions, and then they gave me an example of a chord progression for which you might want to try to use the CAGED system for. So the chord progression was an E minor chord to an F sharp minor over B to an E minor 7 to an F sharp dominant 7 sharp 5 flat 9. So that's some kind of, that last chord right there especially is kind of a funky looking chord there. So can you use the CAGED system to help you to play a complex chord progression like that? And the answer is yes, you can. So all that the CAGED system gives you is just 5 major chord shapes for which you can manipulate into other chords. That's how this works. So the way that you do that is you take any one of the 5 major chord shapes and then you look at it as intervals. So you look at it as a 1, 3, and a 5. And then from there, you apply the general rules of chord construction to manipulate it into whatever chord you're trying to create. So general chord construction rules, that's the stuff that applies to any instrument. It applies to guitar, piano, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's not just guitar specific. You know, like the fact that a minor chord is a major chord with a flattened third. That's something that applies to the piano, it applies to the saxophone, it applies to the oboe, it applies to the guitar. So the general rules of chord construction are kind of like a prerequisite to really kind of get the most out of the CAGED system, but just understand that the CAGED system is simply just giving you 5 different starting shapes. That's what it gives you. Then your knowledge of music theory, you take that and you manipulate these shapes. So the very first thing I do is I look and I see the E minor chord and the E minor 7 chord. So those are common chords. I play those all the time. So how do I normally play an E minor or an E minor 7 chord? So anytime I see a minor chord or a minor 7th chord, I like to play it using this shape. This is my favorite shape to play those types of chords in. So right here, 7th fret rooted on the A string, this is an E minor chord. Now, if you lift up your pinky and you keep the same shape, this is an E minor 7 chord. So how exactly did that come from the CAGED system? As I said, the CAGED system is 5 major chord shapes. So in order to play an E minor or an E minor 7, you would have to start with an E major chord. So this right here was actually played in what is known as the A shape of the CAGED system. So if you play an E major chord in the A shape, it looks like this. Alright, but instead of just looking at that as just the shape, you look at it as the intervals, the 1, 3s, and 5. So knowing that information, you can then take this major chord and then you can turn it into a minor chord. In order to turn it into a minor chord, you would need to know the general rule of chord construction, which tells you that a minor chord is just a major chord with a flattened third. So if a major chord is 1, 3, 5, a minor chord is 1, flat 3, 5. So in this shape, in the A shape, you only have one instance of the third. So you take that third, you lower it by a half step, now you have a flat third. So here's your E minor chord. Alright, so that's the explanation of how we got the minor chord from the CAGED system. So how would you take that and then further manipulate it into an E minor 7 chord? Well, knowing your general music theory, a minor 7th chord formula is a 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7. So we already have the 1, flat 3, and the 5 here. Now we just got to get the flat 7 in there. So anytime you see a flat 7, you know that that is the note that is found 1 whole step below the 1. So any instance of the 1 that we have, if we can somehow fit a note in there that's 1 whole step lower than that, that's where the flat 7 is. We have the 1 right here. All right, so if you want to try and get the note in that's 1 whole step lower than the 1, it's right there on the 7th fret. So you can still keep the shape intact, and that's actually accomplished just by lifting up your pinky here. So you have your 1, your 5, your flat 7, your flat 3, and your 5. Alright, so let's now look at the F sharp minor over B chord. So this is what's known as a slash chord. So the F sharp minor part, that's just a minor chord. That's just a basic minor chord. We could just start with any major chord shape, any of the 5 major CAGED shapes, make a slight manipulation to it, and then we would be left with an F sharp minor chord. Easy. The over B part just means that the bass note of the chord needs to be the note B. So if I wanted to play an F sharp minor chord, I already know how to play a minor chord. I just got done playing a minor chord. I played an E minor chord. So if I want to play an F sharp minor chord, I just move that same shape up The root is now on the note F sharp, so now I'm playing an F sharp minor chord. So now I need to put it over a B. So it's an F sharp minor over B. That's the chord that we're trying to create here. So let's see if I can find any B's around here. So there's a B down here, 7th fret of the low E string, but I can't really get my finger all the way down there while maintaining the shape. So whenever you have your note on the low E string, you can find the same note 2 frets higher and then skipping a string. So that means that there's a B right here on the 9th fret of the D string. So here's that F sharp minor chord right there. We know there's a B right there, 9th fret of the D string. So you also don't have to play these CAGED shapes in full either. You don't have to always play all 5 strings or all 6 strings. So knowing that, I just need to keep the 1, the flat 3, and the 5. That will satisfy the requirements of an F sharp minor chord. So I have a 1 here, I have a flat 3 here, I have a 5 here, all right? And then that B is right there. All right, so 9th fret of the D string plus the rest of this stuff, there's your F sharp minor over B. All right, so that wasn't too bad. So finally we have this F sharp dominant 7, sharp 5, flat 9 chord. So there's a lot going on there. It's kind of a funky looking chord, but you can use the CAGED system to create any chord, doesn't matter. The CAGED system gives us just the major chord shape to start out with. So for this crazy funky chord, it's an F sharp major chord that we would start out with, all right? So let's do that. So let's start out with our F sharp major chord. So we're right in this little area here, so we need to find where an F sharp note is. So there's an F sharp right there on the 9th fret. We were already there. We just got done playing an F sharp minor type of chord. So we know that the F sharp note is right there. Anytime your root note resides on the A string, you have an A shape or a C shape available to you. So an F sharp major chord played in the A shape would look like this. That's actually the shape that was used for that F sharp minor chord that we just got done playing. There's also an F sharp major chord in the C shape available. So you take your pinky, you put it on the note F sharp, 9th fret of the A string, and then you could play an F sharp major chord in the C shape just like that. All right, so you could use either one of those shapes to start with. That's your starting point. You have an F sharp major chord, identify the intervals of the F sharp major chord, and then turn it into the chord that you're trying to create. I already kind of worked through this. I tried to do it with the A shape, and I was unable to get all the intervals in there. You could try it yourself. Maybe you can figure out a way to do it. I wasn't able to do it, but I was able to do it with the C shape, so that's the one we're going to do, and we're going to work through this whole thing, and we're going to get this entire chord, all the essential intervals, and we're going to end up with this crazy F sharp dominant 7 sharp 5 flat 9 chord. All right, so let's do that. So starting with the C shape, you have your intervals. You have your 1, 3, 5, 1, 3. So the first thing to do is you want to get the dominant 7th chord structure in place. Dominant 7th chord is a major triad, so that's your 1, 3, and 5, with a flat 7. The chord formula for a dominant 7th chord is 1, 3, 5, flat 7. So anytime you have flat 7, that's a note that can be found one whole step below the 1. So let's identify where our 1s are. All right, so we have a 1, we have a 3, 5, 1, 3. All right, so we have a 1 there and a 1 there. So it's not really easy to get a note in that's one whole step lower than either one of those 1s while maintaining, the other essential notes. But what you can do is you can recognize that, okay, that's the 1 right there on the A string. Anytime you have a note on the A string, the same note can be found 2 frets up. So skip a string, go to the G, and 2 frets up. So that's the same note. So this note, those are both 1s. A whole step below the 1 is where the flat 7 is. All right, so we just found our flat 7. All right, so 1, 3, flat 7. And that's actually enough to be considered an F sharp dominant 7 chord, because if you need to, you can always drop the 5. That's another chord construction rule. So that's how the CAGED system works. You have 5 major chord shapes that you start out with. Identify where the 1s, 3s, and 5s are. And those are just your little points that you can manipulate and move around, assuming you know your general music theory rules. So the basic rules of chord construction is when you have these extended chords that have all these sharp 5s and flat 9s and all this stuff in there, if you need to, you can drop the 5 and it's not going to affect the function of the chord at all. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So this 1, this 3, and this flat 7, that's an F sharp dominant 7 chord. All right, so now let's take it a little further. Now we need to get the sharp 5 in there, and we need to get the flat 9 in there. We need to get those in there because those are designated in the chord symbol. If it's designated in the chord symbol, like if it's an E minor 7 flat 9 chord, you got to get that flat 9 in there. If it's a blah, blah, blah sharp 5 chord, you got to get that sharp 5 in there. If it's listed on the chord symbol, then it's an essential color tone. So we got to get that sharp 5 and we got to get that flat 9 in there. So let's do that. So back to our original starting shape, the F sharp major chord in the C shape. We have our 1, we have our 3, we have our 5, we have our 1, our 3. All right, so where can we get that sharp 5 in there? So 1, 3, 5. So there's a 5 right there. 1/2 step higher than that, that would be the sharp 5. All right, so we can't get that in there because we're already using a note on that string right there. We already got the flat 7 in there. So there's a sharp 5 there. But anytime you know your note on either the G string or the D string, you can always find the next note in the next octave higher by going up 3 frets and then skipping a string. So we were right here. Here's our sharp 5. So there's our sharp 5 right there. So 3 frets, skip a string, there's the next instance of the sharp 5 in the next octave. So we can get that one in there. So we have our dominant 7th chord structure, and then that's the sharp 5 up here. Finally, we need to get the flat 9 in there. All right, so flat 9, 9 is the same as 2. Anytime you see numbers that are higher than 7, that just means it's coming from the next octave. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So 2 and 9 are the same note. So a 2 can always be found a whole step higher or 2 frets higher than the 1. A flat 9 can always be found 1/2 step higher or 1 fret higher than the 1. So anytime you see a flat 9, you can always throw that into your chord as long as you know where your 1 is. All right. Anytime you see a 9, you can do that too. You throw that in there, but it's just 2 frets higher than the 1. All right, so back to the starting shape again, an F sharp major chord in the C shape. So we have our 1, we have our 3, we have our 5, we have our 1, and that's actually perfect. We have a 1 right there. So far what we've played, we don't have any notes being used on the B string, so that's great. We found our 1 right there. So that means 1/2 step higher. That's that flat 9 note. So in order to play this, we just have to figure out how to, manipulate your fingers or do whatever it takes to get all those notes in there. So we have our dominant 7th chord structure, 1, 3, flat 7. We got that sharp 5 up here, taken care of with your pinky. And then this is the note right here that needs to be added on the 8th fret of the B string. So I can do that by kind of taking my index finger and... Alright, so it's kind of a funky shape there, but hey, that's all your notes. You have your 1, you have your 3, you have your flat 7, you have your flat 9, and then you have your sharp 5. Alright, so that's how you can use the CAGED system to play complex chord progressions. You can play any chord anywhere in the entire neck of the guitar, and you can use the CAGED system to help you do that. The CAGED system, it just gives you your starting shapes, your major chord shape, and then you identify where the 1, 3, and 5 are, and then you take your general music theory knowledge, which is the knowledge that applies to any instrument across the board, which is the knowledge that tells you the chord construction rules, and then you take that information and you manipulate your CAGED shape to create whatever kind of funky chord you're trying to create. So even if the chord is an F sharp dominant 7 sharp 5 flat 9 chord, it all starts out with an F sharp major chord. So that's the CAGED system and an application. Hope this was helpful. Thank you for watching. See you next time.